Get ready to hear a story that will give you goosebumps. Today, we will share the incredible story of Xochitl Cardenas, a young woman who, after being struck by lightning, had a near-death experience that completely changed her life. Not only did she see her past before her eyes, but she also received a terrifying revelation about the future of the planet that no one can ignore. If you want to know what she discovered about what's to come until the end of 2024, stay until the end and subscribe to the channel for more stories that will make you rethink everything you know. Hello, my name is Xochitl Cardenas. I'm 25 years old now, but the story I'm going to tell happened when I was 17. I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas, a city that is a fascinating mix of cultures. My mother, Rosalba, is a strong woman with deep roots in Mexican traditions. I grew up in a home where the new and the old were always in conflict, especially when it came to me and my mother. Ever since I was little, I was what people called a rebel. I couldn't fit into the expectations my mother had for me. She wanted me to follow a more traditional path, but I just wanted to be myself. This caused a lot of conflict between us. Our fights were constant and intense. Every little thing was a cause for discussion. My clothes, my friends, the time I got home. It was as if we spoke different languages. I felt suffocated, misunderstood. I wanted to explore the world in my own way, discover who I was without all these rules and expectations. But to my mother, this was an affront to everything she believed was right. Our relationship was so frayed that silence was often the only form of communication between us. It was a heavy silence, filled with frustration and hurt on both sides. I thought she would never understand me, and I'm sure she thought the same about me. That was my life at 17. A constant battle between who I was and who my mother wanted me to be. I didn't know exactly what I wanted in life, but I was sure it wasn't what I was living. I felt trapped, yearning for freedom and understanding. Little did I know that all of this was about to change in ways I could never have imagined. A single event would completely transform my view of the world, of life, and of what really matters. It was an experience that took me to the limits between life and death, and made me question everything I believed I knew. This is the story of how lightning not only struck my body, but also illuminated my soul, forever changing the course of my life. It was a summer day like any other in El Paso. The heat was intense, stuffy, the kind that seems to suck all the energy out of your body. I was at home, restless, feeling suffocated not just by the heat, but by everything around me. My mother and I had just had yet another argument. I don't remember exactly what it was about, probably something trivial as usual, but the tension in the air was palpable. I decided I needed to get out, get some fresh air, even if it was hot Texas summer air. I looked out the window and saw dark clouds forming on the horizon. A storm was approaching, but that didn't stop me. In fact, the idea of a summer rain seemed refreshing. I left the house without saying where I was going. My mother would probably be worried, but at that moment, I didn't care. I started walking down the streets of El Paso, which were strangely deserted. People must have been taking shelter from the impending storm. But me? I felt free for the first time in a long time. The first drops of rain began to fall, big and heavy. The smell of wet earth filled the air, and I took a deep breath, feeling like I was clearing my lungs of all the negativity in the house. The rain got heavier, but I continued walking. My clothes were soaked, my hair stuck to my face, but I felt alive. It was then that everything changed in the blink of an eye. A blinding flash lit up the entire sky, immediately followed by a deafening boom. I felt my hair stand on end. A strange feeling ran through my body. Before I could process what was happening, I saw lightning strike a nearby tree. Branches and sparks flew everywhere. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the lightning ricocheting off the tree toward me. It was as if I could see each branch of lightning reaching toward me. I wanted to run, move, do anything, but my body wouldn't respond. I was paralyzed as if my feet were glued to the floor. The impact was indescribable. A searing pain ran through my entire body. It was as if every cell was on fire. My muscles contracted violently, and I lost control over my own body. I fell to the ground, shaking uncontrollably, unable to scream, unable to call for help. The smell of ozone and burning flesh filled my senses. My vision blurred, dark spots dancing before my eyes. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. Everything around me seemed to be disappearing. My thoughts were a mess. Flashbacks of my life flashed through my mind. I saw my mother's face. I heard our arguments. I felt the weight of our disagreements. At that moment, everything seemed so insignificant, so meaningless. The last thing I remember before everything went dark was the thought, "Mom, I'm sorry." And then, darkness enveloped me. What happened next is something I still struggle to describe in words. It's an experience that challenges everything I believed possible, everything I thought I knew about life and death. Suddenly, the unbearable pain I felt stopped. It was as if someone had turned off a switch. Instead of the pain, I felt an indescribable lightness. It was as if all the weight on my body, all the worries and anguish I carried, had simply disappeared. I opened my eyes, or at least I thought I had, and found myself floating above my own body. It was me, but at the same time it wasn't. The body on the floor was motionless, burned, with singed clothes and hair standing on end. But I, the consciousness that observed all this, felt more alive than ever. It was at that moment that I saw my mother running towards me. She must have followed me, or maybe she heard the lightning. The desperation on his face was palpable. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she screamed my name, shaking my limp body on the floor. I wanted to comfort her, tell her that everything was okay, that I was there. But I couldn't. My voice wouldn't come out, and when I tried to touch her, my hand went straight through her. It was a strange sensation, like trying to hold water with your hands open. I watched as she desperately tried to revive me, doing chest compressions and screaming for help. People started to gather around us, some calling emergency services, others trying to help my mother. It was at that moment that I felt a deep sadness, not because of the possibility of being dead, but because of all the suffering I had caused my mother. I saw in his eyes an unconditional love that I had never noticed before. All our fights, all our disagreements seemed so insignificant now. I wanted to go back, hug her, tell her I loved her, apologize for all the times I hurt her. As I watched this scene, I felt a presence beside me. It wasn't something I could see clearly, but it was a feeling of warmth, of peace. It was as if someone was there to guide me, to comfort me. This presence seemed to gently pull me away from that scene. Part of me wanted to stay, to continue watching my mother, but another part of me knew I needed to continue. It was like being surrounded by a soft, comforting light. As I moved further away, the scene below became smaller and smaller, as if I were ascending. The streets of El Paso, the storm, everything was left behind. And then, in the blink of an eye, I was somewhere else. A place that seemed to exist outside of time and space as we know it. It was the beginning of a journey that would completely change my understanding of life, death, and everything in between. A journey that would lead me to unexpected encounters and surprising revelations. A journey that, although I didn't know it at the time, would transform me deeply and forever. As I walked away from the scene of my accident, I felt enveloped by an indescribable peace. It was as if all the worries and fears I had ever had simply no longer existed. The presence that guided me became clearer, and I found myself facing a being of light. I can't describe exactly what this being was like. It didn't have a defined human shape. It was more like a concentration of bright, pulsing light. But somehow I knew it was a conscious entity. The energy emanating from him was one of pure love and understanding. The being communicated with me, not through words, but through thoughts and feelings. He introduced himself as Azrael, and told me that he was there to guide me on this journey. I felt an immediate connection, as if I had known him for a long time. Azrael took me to a place I can only describe as a vast energy field. It was as if we were floating in an infinite space surrounded by vibrant colors that I had never seen before. Each color seemed to have a life of its own, pulsing and moving in harmony with the others. In that place, I felt deep healing happening. It was as if every wound, every pain, every hurt I had ever experienced was being healed. It was not just a physical healing from the damage caused by the lightning, but an emotional and spiritual healing. I felt complete, whole, in a way I had never felt before. Azrael then showed me something that looked like a huge screen. In it, scenes from my life began to appear. It was like watching a movie, but I could feel every emotion, every thought associated with every moment. I saw myself as a child, playing carefree. I saw my first days at school, my first friends. I also saw the difficult moments, the fights with my mother, the times when I felt misunderstood and alone. Each scene was experienced with incredible intensity. What impressed me most was seeing the impact of my actions on others. I saw how my harsh words affected my mother, how she cried alone after our fights. But I also saw the times when I was kind, when I helped someone without expecting anything in return. I saw the smile on the face of an elderly person I helped cross the street, the gratitude in the eyes of a friend I consoled in a difficult time. This life review was not a judgment. There was no condemnation for my mistakes, just a deep understanding of how my actions affected the world around me. I felt a mixture of shame for the moments I was selfish or cruel, and immense joy for the moments of kindness and love. Azrael made me understand that every action, every word, every thought has an impact on the universe. We are all interconnected in ways that we cannot realize in our everyday lives. Every act of kindness creates waves of positive energy that spread far beyond what we can imagine. This experience made me see my life from a completely new perspective. I realized that many of the things I considered important were actually trivial, and that the moments that really mattered were the ones when I showed love, compassion, and kindness. But the journey was not over. Azrael had more to show me, something that would go beyond my own life, something that concerned the future of humanity as a whole. After reviewing my life, Azrael guided me to what seemed like another dimension. The environment around us changed, and I found myself in front of a series of moving images, as if I were watching a movie from the future. The first scenes I saw were disturbing. I watched as a massive blackout spread across the planet, plunging entire cities into darkness. Azrael explained to me that this was not a natural event, but something orchestrated by a group of powerful people who sought to increase their control over humanity. I saw people in panic, running through the dark streets. Communication systems failing, hospitals struggling to keep their equipment running. It was a scene of total chaos. But the worst was yet to come. With the blackout came a severe food shortage. I saw long lines of desperate people looking for food, empty supermarkets, abandoned farms. Hunger spread like a plague, affecting both urban and rural areas. I saw families struggling to survive, people losing hope. It was a period of great suffering and difficulty for humanity. Azrael explained to me that these events would begin to unfold by the end of 2024. I was shocked by how close these events were. I wanted to know why this was happening, why these powerful people wanted to cause so much suffering. The answer I received was complex. Azrael showed me how fear and greed can corrupt even those with the best intentions. I saw how the desire for power and control can blind people to the suffering they cause. It was a painful lesson about human nature and the consequences of our choices. But then, something changed in the visions. After the period of darkness and difficulty, I saw a light emerging. I saw people coming together, communities forming to help each other. I saw the birth of a new collective consciousness, a deeper understanding of our interconnectedness as human beings. I watched as, slowly, order began to be restored. It was not a return to what was before, but the emergence of something new. I saw fairer systems being created based on cooperation and mutual respect. I saw a new kind of technology emerging, one that worked in harmony with nature rather than against it. It was as if humanity had undergone a painful but necessary transformation process. The difficulties had served as a catalyst for a profound change in the way we lived and related to each other and the planet. Azrael made me understand that the future was not written in stone. The visions I had seen were possibilities, not absolute certainties. Our individual and collective actions had the power to shape the future. I was struck by the responsibility this entailed. Each of us, with our daily choices, was contributing to shaping the future of humanity. It was a thought that was both frightening and empowering. Azrael told me that I should prepare myself for what was coming, not just physically, storing food and supplies, but also mentally and spiritually. I would need to be strong to help others during the difficult times ahead. As I took all of this in, I felt a change in the environment around me. Azrael's presence seemed to be dissipating, and a new, even more powerful energy began to manifest. I was about to have an encounter that would completely change my understanding of love and the purpose of life. As Azrael's presence faded, an intense light began to form before me. It was a light unlike anything I had ever seen or felt before. It was warm, welcoming, and somehow alive. From within that light, a figure emerged that I immediately recognized. It was Jesus. He was not the Jesus of the paintings or films I had seen. It was a presence so real, so palpable, that it made everything I had ever experienced before seem like a distant dream. His eyes were deep, filled with a love I didn't even know was possible. When he smiled at me, I felt like the entire universe was smiling together. Jesus did not speak in words, but his presence communicated more than any words could. I felt an unconditional love emanating from him, a love that encompassed not just me, but all of creation. It was a love that didn't judge, didn't condemn, just accepted and welcomed. In that moment, all my doubts, fears, and insecurities simply dissolved. I felt completely seen and understood, not just for who I was in that moment, but for everything I had ever been and everything I could become. Jesus then began to show me visions. I saw how every act of love, no matter how small, created waves of positive energy that spread throughout the universe. I saw how a kind smile could change someone's day, how an act of forgiveness could heal deep wounds, how a gesture of compassion could save a life. He made me understand that the true purpose of life was not to accumulate wealth, gain power, or achieve fame. The true purpose was to learn to love and be loved. It was growing in compassion, in understanding, in kindness. It was recognizing the divinity in each being and honoring that divinity through our actions. Jesus showed me how interconnected we all are. I saw humanity as a great web of light, where each individual was a bright point connected to everyone else. I understood that when we hurt someone, we are actually hurting ourselves, and when we help someone, we are elevating all of humanity. He told me about forgiveness. It showed me how resentment and anger are burdens we carry unnecessarily. I saw how forgiveness was not just a gift we gave to others, but a gift we gave to ourselves. It was a liberation, a deep healing. Jesus also spoke to me about the importance of honoring our own journey. It made me understand that every challenge, every difficulty we face is an opportunity for growth, that we shouldn't compare ourselves to others, as each of us has our own unique path to travel. I felt a deep peace envelop me. All the worries I had before, the fights with my mother, the uncertainty about my future, seemed so small now. I had a new perspective, a broader understanding of what really mattered. But then Jesus showed me something that made my heart sink. I saw my family in the hospital gathered around my body. I saw the suffering in my mother's eyes, the concern on my father's face. I saw friends crying, praying for my recovery. Jesus then gave me a choice. I could stay in that place of infinite peace and love, or I could return to my earthly life. He told me that if I chose to return, I would take with me some of that love, that understanding, that I would have the opportunity to share what I had learned, to make a difference in the world in a way that only I could do. The decision was not easy. Part of me wanted to stay in that place of perfect peace and love. But seeing my family's suffering, remembering the visions of the future that Azrael had shown me, I knew what I needed to do. With a heavy heart due to my mother's sadness and the responsibility of what I had learned, I chose to return. The transition back into my body was abrupt and intense. One moment I was enveloped in light and love in the presence of Jesus. The next I was being pulled back into physical reality. It was like diving into ice-cold water after being in a warm, cozy bath. The first thing I felt was pain, a searing pain that seemed to course through every inch of my body. My eyes opened and the hospital light momentarily blinded me. The sounds around me were a confusing cacophony. Machine beeping, muffled voices, the sound of my own groaning in pain. I felt a hand holding mine. When my vision finally cleared, I saw it was my mother. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, but a smile of relief lit up her face. "Xochitl," she whispered. "Thank God you're back." I wanted to tell her everything that had happened, everything I had seen and learned. But my throat was dry and my voice wouldn't come out. All I could do was squeeze her hand back, hoping that somehow she would feel all the love I now felt for her. The next few days were a confusing mix of medical tests, visits from family and friends, and failed attempts to explain my experience. The doctors marveled at my recovery, which they called miraculous. The burns from the lightning were healing at incredible speed, and there were no signs of permanent neurological damage. But the real miracle I knew was the transformation that had taken place within me. I felt different. It was like I was seeing the world through new eyes. Every color seemed more vibrant, every sound clearer. And more than that, I felt a deep connection with everything and everyone around me. I tried to share my experience with my family and doctors. I talked about Azrael, about Jesus, about visions of the future. I spoke about the unconditional love I had felt, about the interconnectedness of all things. But it was frustrating. Words seemed inadequate to describe what I had experienced, and I could see in their eyes a mix of confusion, skepticism, and concern. My mother, in particular, didn't seem to know how to react. On the one hand, she was obviously relieved and happy that I was alive and recovering. On the other, I could see that she was concerned about the weird ideas I was expressing. She even suggested that I speak to a psychologist, thinking that the trauma of the accident had affected my mind. It was difficult to deal with this misunderstanding. I felt isolated, like I was carrying a precious secret that no one else could see or understand. I started keeping more to myself, talking less about my experience. But at the same time, I felt a growing urgency. The visions of the future that Azrael had shown me were always present in my mind. I knew difficult times were coming, and that I needed to prepare, not just myself, but also help others prepare. As I recovered physically, I began to think about how I could put what I had learned into practice. How could I share the love and understanding I had experienced? How could you help people prepare for the challenges ahead? I knew it wouldn't be easy. People wouldn't easily believe my visions of the future. But I also knew that I couldn't just ignore what I had learned. I had a responsibility now, a purpose. And so, as my body healed, I started planning, thinking of ways to live up to the truths I had discovered, to share the love I had experienced, and to help others prepare for what was to come. My journey, I realized, was just beginning. In the months following my release from the hospital, I found myself on a constant search for answers. The experience I had was so profound, so transformative, that I couldn't just go back to my normal life and pretend nothing had happened. I started exploring different churches in the El Paso area. I went to Catholic masses, Protestant services, spiritual group meetings. In each place, I hoped to find someone who could help me better understand what had happened to me, someone who had perhaps gone through something similar. It was during one of these visits that I met Sister Guadalupe. She was an elderly nun, with kind eyes and a welcoming smile. From the first moment we spoke, I felt she was different. She listened to me without judging, without trying to convince me of anything. When I told her about my experience, I saw in her eyes not skepticism, but deep understanding. Sister Guadalupe became my spiritual guide. She introduced me to mystical texts, taught me meditation techniques, helped me process what I had experienced. Most importantly, she helped me understand that my experience, as extraordinary as it was, did not make me special or superior to others. It was a gift, yes, but a gift that came with the responsibility to serve and love others. It was also Sister Guadalupe who gave me my first Bible. I remember sitting in my room, opening that book with a mixture of awe and curiosity. The words took on a new meaning in light of my experience. I began reading daily, finding comfort and guidance in the ancient words. At the same time, I started to become more interested in my physical and mental health. The near-death experience had made me realize how precious life was, and I wanted to honor that gift by taking better care of myself. I started practicing yoga, meditating regularly, paying more attention to what I ate. But not everything was easy. Sometimes I felt overwhelmed by the weight of what I had seen and learned. The visions of the future that Azrael had shown me were a heavy burden. How could I prepare for something so immense? How could you help others prepare? I started storing non-perishable foods, learning basic survival skills. I tried talking to friends and family about the need to prepare for difficult times, but most of the time I was met with skeptical or worried looks. My relationship with my mother was also going through changes. The constant arguments we had had before the accident had stopped, replaced by an uncomfortable truce. I could see that she was happy that I was alive, but also worried about the changes in my behavior. I tried several times to talk to her about my experience, to explain how it had changed my perspective on life, but it was difficult. Words seemed inadequate to express the depth of what I had experienced. Little by little, however, I noticed that my mother was beginning to notice positive changes in me. I was calmer, more patient. The little things that used to make us fight no longer seemed so important. I started helping more at home, showing more affection and gratitude. I saw her gaze gradually change from concern to a kind of wary admiration. One day, while we were washing the dishes together, my mother turned to me and said, "I don't know what happened to you that day, Mija, but whatever it was, I'm grateful. You came back different, better." Those words meant the world to me. It was the first real recognition of the transformation I had undergone. Meanwhile, I continued my search for a way to share what I had learned. I started attending a support group for people who have had near-death experiences. There, I finally found other people who could understand, at least in part, what I had experienced. Hearing others' stories was a powerful experience. I realized that although each experience was unique, there were common themes: unconditional love, the feeling of interconnectedness with the entire universe, the loss of the fear of death. Sharing my own story in this safe environment helped me process it better and find words to express what previously felt inexpressible. It was in this group that I had the idea of starting to visit nursing homes. Many of the elderly people there were nearing the end of their lives and were afraid of what would come next. I started spending a few hours a week talking to them, listening to their stories, and, when appropriate, sharing some of my experience. Seeing the relief and hope in those elderly people's eyes when I talked about the love and peace I had experienced on the other side was incredibly humbling. Not only was I helping to alleviate their fears, but I was also finding purpose in my own experience. At the same time, I couldn't forget the visions of the future that Azrael had shown me. I started studying sustainability, permaculture, renewable energy. I wanted to be prepared for the challenges that would come and help others prepare too. I started a small study group in my community. I didn't talk directly about my views, but I used what I had learned to teach people about the importance of living more sustainably and self-sufficiently. He taught techniques for growing food, conserving water, and reducing waste. Little by little, I felt like I was finding a balance. I was honoring the experience I had lived, sharing the love and wisdom I had received, and at the same time preparing myself and helping others prepare for the future. One day I had a dream in which the date September 5th was shown to me. I saw that something big would happen that day. Of course, not everyone understood or believed me. There were days when people's disbelief hurt me, when the magnitude of what I knew was coming scared me. But then I would remember the unconditional love I had felt in the presence of Jesus, the interconnectedness of all the things I had experienced, and I would find the strength to carry on. My near-death experience hadn't just been about me. It was a call to serve, to love, to help pave the way for a better future. And I was determined to honor that calling, one day at a time.